Now I'd like to help kick off the premiere of an exciting new comedy show, which you're all going to enjoy for a long, long time, starring Tom and Dick Smothers.
Well, was that it?
Yep, I like to hit 'em hard and get out quick.
Tommy, that's a stupid song. I never heard of it, I don't know where you got it, but it's stupid.
A tape arrived at CBS headquarters on an ordinary afternoon in April 1969. Within minutes, executives were making emergency phone calls. Alarm bells were ringing through every corridor of the building. What was on that tape wasn't violent. It wasn't obscene. It was something CBS considered far more dangerous: the truth. 6 days later, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was dead. No press conference, no farewell episode, no explanation to the millions of viewers who tuned in every Sunday night. The tape never aired in America, but what happened because of it rewired the entire DNA of American television. To understand why a comedy show terrified one of the most powerful media empires in the world, you have to go back to a moment when America itself was being torn apart. The year was 1967. 3 television networks controlled everything Americans saw, heard, and believed at night: NBC, ABC, and CBS. Each one a gatekeeper. Each one deeply invested in keeping the peace, not the peace on the streets, where protests were growing louder by the day, but the comfortable, profitable peace of suburban living rooms. CBS was the undisputed king of safe. The Ed Sullivan Show. Bonanza, clean, predictable, and advertiser-friendly. But something was shifting in the culture that no television executive could fully ignore. Young people were burning draft cards. Students were occupying university buildings. An entire generation was rejecting the world their parents had handed them. And none of that rage, grief, or energy was showing up on primetime television. CBS needed something fresh, something that could pull younger viewers away from NBC's Sunday night lineup. The Smothers Brothers seemed like the perfect solution. Tom and Dick Smothers were 2 brothers with a natural chemistry. Tom, the lovably dim older brother; Dick, the sharper, musically gifted straight man. Their act was warm and unthreatening. CBS executives looked at them and saw exactly what they wanted: harmless family entertainment wrapped in a generational package. They were wrong about nearly every part of that calculation. The show premiered on February 5, 1967, and the first episode delivered precisely what CBS expected: music, gentle bickering between brothers, light comedy sketches. But Tom Smothers was already thinking several moves ahead. He had no interest in being television wallpaper. He wanted to use the show as a vehicle for something that network television had never truly attempted: honest engagement with the world that existed outside the studio walls. He began slowly, deliberately, carefully enough that CBS didn't immediately recognize what was happening until it was too late to reverse course. The musical guests came first. Pete Seeger, a man who had been effectively blacklisted from television for years because of his anti-war politics, walked onto the Smothers Brothers stage and sang directly to the American people. Then came Harry Belafonte, Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who. These weren't merely entertainers filling a time slot. They were artists carrying messages that the establishment had spent years trying to keep off the airwaves. Tom had created a Trojan horse, and CBS had wheeled it directly into the center of American living rooms. Behind the cameras, something equally significant was happening. Tom hired a writer's room full of young, sharp, politically aware talent. Among them was a 21-year-old from Waco, Texas named Steve Martin. These writers understood instinctively what the older CBS executives could not: that comedy was no longer just an escape. For millions of young Americans, it had become the most honest language available. The sketches shifted almost imperceptibly from silly to incisive, from jokes about family life to precision strikes against the war machine, political hypocrisy, and the comfortable lies of authority. College students began quoting the show in cafeterias and dormitories. For perhaps the first time in television history, young people felt genuinely seen by a primetime program. The ratings climbed, particularly among the 18 to 25 demographic that advertisers were desperate to reach. But CBS was growing uneasy. Local affiliates in the South were threatening to pull the show. Angry letters filled the network mailroom. Advertisers were asking uncomfortable questions about what exactly they were funding. Tom refused to back down. He refused to cut guests. He refused to soften jokes when he believed the underlying point was worth making. CBS began demanding tapes 10 days before airtime for review and pre-approval. Tom began deliberately missing those deadlines, keeping his most powerful material until the last possible moment, knowing that CBS would have less time to gut it. The relationship between the show's creators and the network deteriorated from friction into open warfare. Dick Smothers found himself trapped in the middle, believing deeply in what they were doing but watching the collision approaching and knowing he couldn't stop it. The comedian Pat Paulson launched a fake presidential campaign from the show's stage, delivering deadpan speeches so precisely calibrated to the absurdity of real politics that actual politicians began to squirm. He promised to build more potholes to test the character of voters. He pledged to approach every national crisis with patience and procrastination. The audiences laughed, but the laughter had an edge to it, the bitter recognition of people who felt their government had been mocking them first. Then David Steinberg walked onto the stage dressed as a man of the cloth, and nothing was ever the same again. Steinberg had discovered something explosive, that the most subversive space in American culture was the pulpit. He performed what he called sermons, mixing biblical scripture with contemporary politics in routines that were simultaneously funny and deeply unsettling for anyone who held authority sacred. CBS received over 300 letters and calls in a single week after one of Steinberg's performances. Southern affiliates refused to air entire episodes, but on college campuses, bootleg recordings of censored Steinberg sketches were passed from hand to hand like dispatches from a revolution. The more young America loved the show, the more institutional America feared it. CBS tightened its grip. Scripts were scrutinized word by word. Guest lists were reviewed for political danger. The 10-day review requirement became a weapon deployed against the show's most potent content. But Tom Smothers had made a decision somewhere along the way that some things were worth losing the show over. He had decided that integrity was not negotiable. In early April 1969, Tom completed what would become the most consequential episode in the show's history. David Steinberg was back. The stage was dressed to resemble a house of worship, a single spotlight illuminating the pulpit like a declaration of intent. Steinberg walked out dressed as a rabbi and delivered a 5-minute performance that reframed the entire story of Moses, not as divine obedience, but as an act of conscience. In his telling, Moses wasn't following God. He was following something deeper, the same unshakable moral clarity that was driving young men to refuse their draft notices, the same refusal that was filling American courtrooms and prisons with people who simply would not participate in what they believed was wrong. The moment that stopped CBS executives cold came when Moses turned toward Pharaoh and said what an entire generation of young Americans had been screaming into the air for years, that no authority, no matter how powerful, could compel a person to participate in injustice. The studio audience erupted. For CBS, it wasn't the applause that was terrifying, it was the recognition that this wasn't comedy anymore. This was a direct indictment of a sitting president broadcast into the homes of 60 million Americans. The sketch ended with folk music and a prayer shawl thrown into the crowd, a benediction for a generation that had stopped believing in the institutions that were supposed to protect them. When that tape reached CBS, the network's response was immediate and absolute. They declared the episode had missed its deadline. They demanded Steinberg's entire performance be excised from the broadcast. Tom refused. Not because he was reckless, but because he understood that agreeing would mean the show had already surrendered everything that made it matter. On April 4, 1969, CBS terminated their contract with the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour without a public statement, without a farewell broadcast, without the courtesy of an explanation to the millions of viewers who had made it one of the most culturally significant programs on American television. The following Sunday, the time slot was filled by Hee Haw, a cheerful, unchallenging country variety show that would never threaten anyone in any building in Washington. The banned episode never crossed an American broadcast tower, but it aired in Canada, and from there, bootleg copies found their way onto campuses across the United States with the speed and energy of contraband. Student newspapers published analyses of the content. Discussion groups formed in university libraries. The censored tape became something more powerful than a television episode. It became a symbol of every idea that power had ever tried to bury. The fallout was immediate and devastating for the brothers. Tom was radioactive in the industry. The offers stopped overnight. Dick, despite having often urged caution, was tarred by the same brush. They existed in a professional exile that the television industry enforced with quiet, efficient brutality. But they refused to disappear quietly. They sued CBS for breach of contract, arguing that the cancellation was a legal pretext for an act of political suppression. The case dragged through the courts for 4 years. In 1973, they won. CBS was ordered to pay more than $770,000. The money arrived long after their careers had been effectively dismantled. Justice without restoration is a cold comfort, but they accepted it and kept going. Dick later acknowledged something important, that Tom's absolute refusal to compromise, while admirable and perhaps even necessary, had cost the show longevity that might have amplified its message further. Tom's position was that half a truth told in safety was still a lie. Both men were right. Both men paid the full price. The cancellation sent a chill through an entire generation of television creators. Young writers and producers watched what happened to the Smothers brothers and understood the precise location of the walls they would be working inside. But some of them also absorbed something else entirely, the proof that it was possible, that a television show could operate simultaneously as entertainment and as genuine political engagement, that audiences would respond with loyalty and passion when television chose courage over comfort. Lorne Michaels, who would go on to create Saturday Night Live, was explicit about the debt he owed to what Tom Smothers had built and what CBS had destroyed. Without the Smothers brothers, there is no Saturday Night Live. Without that precedent, the entire lineage of American political comedy looks different. For years, the show existed in a kind of cultural purgatory, too recent to be historical, too controversial to be celebrated officially. But something remarkable happened over time. The culture caught up with what Tom Smothers had always known. Sketches that had once been deemed too incendiary began to look, in retrospect, like the most accurate journalism of their era. The fake presidential campaign, the censored sermons, the musicians who sang about the war, all of it had been real in a way that the news programs of the same period, constrained by their own forms of deference, often were not. In 2008, nearly 4 decades after the cancellation, Tom Smothers stood on a stage at the Emmy Awards and received an honorary award for work that had nearly destroyed his career. He accepted it with 7 words. "Peace," he said, "is harder than war." The room went quiet in a way that only the truth can make a room go quiet. 2 years later, both brothers were inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame. Official recognition, belated and meaningful, that what they had done mattered. Shortly afterward, it was confirmed that Tom and Dick Smothers had appeared on President Nixon's enemies list. The inclusion wasn't incidental. It was confirmation that their show had done exactly what they intended. It had genuinely unsettled power. In 2022, the complete archive of the show, scripts, production notes, internal memos, censored tapes, and Tom's own handwritten notes, was transferred to UC Santa Barbara. Among the materials were sketches that CBS had explicitly ordered destroyed. Their survival was a small miracle, and their preservation, a larger act of justice. Researchers and documentary filmmakers began working through the archive, reconstructing a more complete picture of how extensively and systematically CBS had suppressed the show's most honest work. When Tom Smothers died in late 2023, the response was unlike anything typically granted to a comedian whose greatest work was more than 50 years old. Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Sarah Silverman all spoke about him not as a historical curiosity, but as the foundation beneath their own careers. Comedians who had never met him understood instinctively that he had cleared the ground they were standing on. Clips flooded social media. A fake presidential campaign speech from 1968, promising to solve every national problem by simply waiting for it to disappear, circulated millions of times because it was still, heartbreakingly, funny. The show hadn't aged. It had simply been waiting for the culture to be honest enough to admit what it had always been. Not a comedy program that occasionally touched politics, but a genuine act of resistance that used laughter as its most precise weapon. The tape that CBS tried to bury became, in the end, impossible to kill. Ideas with that much honesty in them tend to be,